everybody. Thank you for coming. I'm going to talk about Mantic visions and the subtle eye of matter. It's a talk that's to do with my choreographic and dance process, my creative process, and my the way the visionary faculty informs what I do with my body. The esoteric or occult knowledge is revealed in revelatory episodes, in visions that are felt to descend on us when we are engodded, or when dreaming or enraptured, we are transported to a visionary realm. In this talk, I will discuss how my occult practice informs my choreographic process, with specific reference to visitation, the performance I gave yesterday, and the apocalyptaria cycle, of which it's the second dance. In process and in performance, I ask how we see and make visible what is hidden. The sense of vision, and specifically the visionary capacity, whether accessed through the techniques of interior visualization, such as Jung's active imagination, or tantric and yogic practices, butō, which is the choreographic process that I use in my dance, developed by Hijikata Tatsumi, in which images are placed within the body and the mind's eye and stimulate movement. Lucid dreaming and the ability to receive visions in scrying and divination, all these processes are intrinsic to my practice as an occultist creating dance, or a dancer whose interest is in exploring certain heretical and occulted aspects of existence through the body. So this is the first dance from the apocalyptaria cycle, the decollation of flowers, and this is from the final section called Calyptrome, which was revealed to me in a dream. Both the title and some of the postures in the dance. It's a revisioning of the dance of Salome. I consider the body in performance as a place of seeing, from Greek theatron, and as the place of the god or goddess, or gods, the theos or thea. Though the connection appears to be phonetic rather than etymological, the experience of being enthused or engodded radically shifts one's perception, both of the internal world and the world beyond our skin, whether through invocation or in theurgy. When I began working on the apocalyptaria dances, I took, along with the veil, the Mantis as the primary totem or icon. So I worked with this image, which is a hieroglyph, and I was very intrigued by this line from Norman D. Ellis's translation of the Book of the Dead. Mantis, this landscape is hidden from all but the most holy eye. So this informed my process throughout the working on the apocalyptaria so far, and also I gave it to Angie Chung when she was doing the music, so that we had a similar resonance, as well as informing her what I was working on and the stages of the dance for visitation. We were linked with this symbolic mantis figure. It's a hieroglyph. So what attracts me to the mantis is that it has an extraordinary power of mimesis. Its vision is stereoscopic. It sees in 3D in a very unusual way. It's keenly attuned to movement and depth perception. And of course, its association with the sacred and magic. The mantis is a trickster god and a shapeshifter. Okay, getting there. Let's go back. A shapeshifter for the Sham people of South Africa. It's a dancer psychopomp, the Egyptian abbot. So here we see an Egyptian, it's from the opening of the mouth ritual, an Egyptian mantis. Mantises are very rare in Egyptian. You would think they have all kinds of flora and fauna in their writing, but mantis is only mentioned a few times, and it's in the Book of the Dead and in the opening of the mouth ritual. So in the Book of the Dead, or the Book of Going Forth by Day, it's mentioned in spell 76. Spell for being transformed into any shape one may wish to take, which I've taken as a spell for dancers. And in spell 105, spell for sitting amongst the great gods. So he's a psychopomp, or it's a psychopomp that brings you across, brings you through trans, across dimensions. It's also symbolic of death and eros. and of the insatiable, capricious, and destructive woman. Yet conversely, also of the beloved, notably for the surrealists. We have, for example, Giacometti's Woman with Her Throat Cut, which is a really violent and strange, misogynistic almost piece of surrealist art, bronze. And one of my favorite decks for divining with the surrealist Jeu de Marseille on the playing card La Miel. La Miel inspired by the passionate heroine of Stendhal's last and unfinished novel, The Mantis. The work of Roger Caillois is also particularly fascinating for me. Many aspects of what he's done has inspired my work. He likens the mantis to a sorcerer trapped in their own spell. He writes, "Mimicry would thus be accurately defined as an incantation fixed at its culminating point and having caught the sorcerer in his own trap." And there's also, in Theocritus's Idylls, the slender mantis-like girl he refers to. There'll be a mantis to clasp you all night long. So I think the connection of the mantis with the feminine, as well as with seers, dancers, and divinity, has made it a very potent totem for me to work with on this cycle. That's coming. This is a very interesting deck to divine with, especially if you're on psychoactive inspiration, however you get there. It's a prismatic. The corporeal and the visual. Vision connects us to truth as it distances us from the corporeal, write Evelyn Fox Keller and Christine Grontowski in their essay The Mind's Eye, summarizing the epistemological formula of Western philosophy. But I want to question this distance between the sense of vision and the body. If the living body is, as phenomenology understands, the basis of being and knowing, then all forms of knowing, including the visionary, should be considered in terms of the flesh. Merleau-Ponty recognized that sight is embodied, that vision is in carnal relation with the world. I see the visionary also in carnal relation with the world, for the visionary is deeply implicated in the flesh, the living, palpitating tissue of consciousness. The visionary is embodied. In devising dynamic, embodied, and creative approaches to working with the unseen dimensions of the world, its spirits, its presences, and noumena, and working with the body to bring those hidden dimensions, or the movements and depths of consciousness, to light, I find no clear line between the sense of vision, visionary imagination, and the body that sees. In my practice, I use, as I mentioned earlier, numerous techniques in order to bring out the choreography. I work with interior visualization, with the butō, but also with tantric and yogic practices of visualization, which I've been doing for even longer than I've been a dancer. Dreaming very important, both the dreams that just come to you with this sort of insight, but also those where lucid dreaming. I've been doing lucid dreaming for some years now. Scrying, divination, and also pharmakia, in the sense both of psychoactive drugs, incantation, and idolatry. The concept for visitation, the piece which I performed yesterday, arose from my desire to see Venus, the heavenly body that rules erotic love and the occult sex of women, inspired and tantalized by imagings of the topography of the mysterious cloud-veiled planet. This desire to see, to experience Venus was initiated by my frustration at the lack of material on Babylon, which is the principal divinity who I work with. Hence the need to turn back to the body and the sources, not just to the angelic conversations of Dee and Kelly, but to revelation and to the heavenly body herself, the body behind the veil, beyond all names and forms. And I'm aware that Babylon is associated with, through her history, not just Venus, although that's probably our primary and closest heavenly form that we relate her to, but others. But in this, I'm specifically working with the Venusian. I wanted specifically to have that trajectory to Venus and that sense of being in this more cosmic, but still relate to Earth, something I felt was almost reachable with divine grace. I drew on many techniques to decipher a choreography. The last time I spoke at Trans States, I talked about how my choreography is a form of choreography, a mapping of this territory, and that I use it to create points that I move around, and I visualize the space. So it's very spatial and temporal in that sense. A choreography, or choreography of the visitation, a topography at once of the luminous planet and of female desire. Saturating myself in Venusian imagery and sympathia, incense, perfumes, continuously for this process. And actually, my practice is this. Contemplation, which is theoria, which is an immersive seeing, a holding of the vision. Readings in the geology and atmosphere of Venus. I've become obsessed. Even though it is like reading the most esoteric text imaginable, because I am so not a scientist. But it's like I guess it's like reading the Voces Magicae and things. It is just this immersion in even a language which is esoteric to me, but to imbibe as much, and anything that sort of stimulates my imagination. Readings into the geology, drawing from the Soviet Venera missions. This image is the surface scene from Venera 14, so it's the only, one of the only images we have actually of the surface of the planet Venus. But also of the Magellan mission to Venus, which mapped it using other techniques of seeing. So we're not just seeing with the eyes, we're beginning to see with radar, with sound. So this is Gula Mons. Everything on Venus except two features are named after women. Gula was the Mesopotamian goddess of healing. And here are some very strange Venusian volcanoes, lava domes or pancake domes. And this is an arachnoid, another volcanic feature. Venus is very, 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 very active and volcanic, which, if you know anything about Inanna Ishtar, you'll recognize that this very volatile, transforming, energetic goddess is very much like the surface of the planet herself, which is fascinating. So, yeah, this is another piece that I worked with extensively, meditating. Also partaking of sacraments and psychoactives. For this period was especially cannabis, mandrake, and saffron. Previous work with psychedelics, ayahuasca and LSD particularly, but not this year because my health this year forbid me doing anything that I didn't basically have time or health this year to work with the supervisionary, so I worked very much with this sort of embodied feeling you get with cannabis, mandrake, saffron. And I work in these states, so I will start working with my body through using the psychoactives. The dance is as much about deciphering a process with an inner and an outer choreography that brings about the subjective, energetic, and affective shifts that affect the visitation, as it is about the revelation of performance. Okay. How did that happen? Okay, we're getting there. Okay. As it is about the revelation of performance, the visible and shared experience. I find much in common with Tibetan tantric conceptions of sacred dance, where the body is recognized as the locus of experience and thus also of liberation. Tantric ritual dance embodies psychophysical processes in what Ian Baker calls choreographies of transformation. The aims of my dance are analogous, and I've found resonance and inspiration in the tantric and Eastern traditions. And yet I also look to Western sources, finding especially in certain forms of Christian mysticism, ideas and techniques that inform my practice. For this, I was really intrigued by the work of Thomas Gallus, because to do something impossible like visit Venus, it requires not only an ascent on my part, but the descent of grace on the part of the other. So I am relying on the psychoactive work of particularly the first two sections of the choreography to allow the revelation to happen in the second section, in the third section. In effect, what happened yesterday was the revelation came earlier in the second section, towards the middle of the second section. I had the vision then, and had to take it into my body before. So, I'm going to have to sum up quickly, aren't I? So, what I'm trying to say is that I found Simon Majors' talk very interesting, talking about the visionary, but everything is very focused on sight. For me, the visionary is very much an embodied experience, and that there are states of deep embodiment, such as trance, possession, mimesis, in which you would include dance and acting, in which the vision is very much enfleshed and coming from the flesh, and that you can see a spectrum where you go from these deeply embodied states to tenuously or weakly embodied states, such as dreaming state, psychedelic, all the way towards near-death experiences. For me, the important thing is this: the imagination, the visionary, is in continuous movement, as much when we are awake as when we are sleeping, and that consciousness itself is completely oriented towards movement. We can't think of the visionary without thinking of bodies moving. It's not disembodied mind that dreams. Is something I took very much for the dreaming work, the work of Jennifer Wint, who's a very interesting academic working on the phenomenology of dreaming. And it's that formerly people thought that the mind is like, the dreaming mind is just floating in a vat and totally disembodied, but her work has shown how important the actual sort of senses are of the physical body, even though still tenuously linked. And this is how I found it in effect and practice myself. I've got way too much to say. I'm going to have to publish this. A kind of synesthetic pact exists between the senses, without which our knowledge of the world or the universe or ourselves would be severely restricted. Visions would lack depth and meaning, and so on. A pact that enables a sublime coherence of perceptions grounded in the kinesthetic sense. For me, this is experienced, again, with reference to Thomas Gallus, as an enstatic ecstasy. So when I travel out in my dance, attempting to reach Venus, I'm also descending into the depths of my body. And this happens at the same time. So there is an ascent and a descent, and both a descent from the other outside into the within, but also an eruption from within, coming out, and these meet, and it's impossible because the body becomes vision itself. So when I said that in the second part the vision appeared, it was in front of me like this, but I had to take it into myself, and then my body was what I saw. So this sense, the physical embodiment of a vision, is very much part of the dance process and the choreographic process. It also allows me to have room for, let's say, improvisation, for want of a better word, but for the unknown, for something unexpected to happen, which is a fundamental part of my dance, because I need it to have that potential that I'm not in control of what I see. I want the other to appear. I propose that we think of a continuum. Okay, I'm finishing. I propose that we think of a continuum of embodied states between incarnation and excarnation, from out-of-body to near-death experiences, to the weakly embodied dreaming and psychedelic states, to the immersive deep embodiment of possession and performance. To each of these states belong distinctive modes of seeing, different kinds of knowing. And with the dance and with my work, I integrate all these different visionary streams into one coherent work through the choreography process and through the performance. Thank you. Let's finalize. Oh, there, Devil's Flower Mantis. This one. Oh, can we have the picture back? Yeah. One of my favorites.
So we have a few minutes for questions.
Comments?
I think that was very fascinating. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Are you... This image of the mantis is floating in your talk. At first I thought you were talking about the mantis as meaning seer.
Yeah.
And then I realized you're actually talking about praying mantises. You're talking
They're
about...
the same, they're the same.
They're the same thing, okay.
Yeah. I'm a surrealist in that sense, you know, it's a mantis, it's a mantis, it sees. They are seers.
Okay.
But they're very embodied as well. They're mimics, they're dancers. They dance, they hunt. I think even especially as humans, we've adapted many of our sensory capacity in order to hunt and to survive being hunted. So a lot of our skills that we have, just that we take for granted as human beings, even in this, you know, decadent age, are honed from lifetimes and lifetimes and lifetimes, and not just as humans, but of creatures, evading death, being killed, learning how not to be killed again, and eating. So the mantis is very important for me because it is this pure totem of death and sex and life, but it's a seer, it sees, and it transforms, and transforming is kind of what we're here to do, isn't it? Well, anyway, it's what I'm here to do. Yeah.
Thank you. That answers my question.
Thank you.
Hello, thank you. And thanks for your performance yesterday. It was really fascinating to watch and be part of. I think maybe because I come from a family that has dance running through it, yes, that I've spent a lot of time watching dancers. Yes. And I've always been interested in the experience I have whenever I watch someone dance. And yes, it was fascinating for me the first time seeing you in the same space dancing. And I just wondered if you could comment also on that experience that you have as a dancer watching other dancers dance, and the inner experience that you might have when you're watching them, if that makes sense. I don't know. Yeah. It's a very open question, but...
Everything twitches. The whole body, it starts moving. It's a very deep experience. You really, really feel it. It's, for me, very hard to disentangle what I see from what I feel. It's very, very permeable, and I think as a dancer you really hone that integration or the synesthetic. Or what you do, I would say, is everyone is doing this all the time. Like the synesthesias are how we survive. If our senses weren't continually integrated, we wouldn't be able to function. But I think as a dancer or a martial artist, as someone who's working with their body a lot, this kinesthetic sense is raised to, is more honed in that sense. It's raised to a more active level, like deliberately. So when one watches things, everything is experienced like very emotionally. The emotions are much more like this, more responsive, and the visions, things can trigger visions very easily. This is the kind of it's very immersive. It's hard to distinguish. I was like this before I became a dancer, but the dancing has probably exaggerated it. Yeah, has made that more powerful.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you for that.
Thank you.
I was just wondering, when you're dancing, does that feed through into your typography?
Yes.
Yes. And how would you go about that?
It's accidental, but it's just sort of natural bleed, I guess, or transferable skills. But my sense of space or sense of timing and proportion, the geometry, is very important in the aesthetic that I use in typography and like layout and design. So yeah, it's that sense of the sort of spatial awareness and sense of timing. If that makes sense.
Yeah, because a page has a kind of limitation.
There's a mathematics and a geometry to it, and the geometry My dance is quite chaotic in a way because I very much enjoy exploring, very interested to explore the movements beyond control. But there is in every single movement an inherent geometry because the way our bodies work is completely mathematically precise, no matter what we do. And one can exaggerate this or one can disguise this with, sort of drenching in emotion or something and finding things that are beyond, a language beyond rational language, which is my interest in dance. But for the page, I'm very interested in a strict geometry. I really like the purity of the black and the white, or the limited elements. But yeah, there's a transference of, or a bleed through.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.